All right, welcome everybody to, according to Andrew number 27, what I am deeming the twin tiger theory, which is basically we know that the main threat from Asia is China in terms of the next superpower that's going to take over America. But one of the things that's assumed currently is that even if America, or maybe it's not assumed, but that if America falls, the soft power that they currently project culturally with Hollywood and all the food that we have and stuff like that will continue to be a predominant thing. It'll be kind of like when Rome took over from Greece as a predominant power, and a lot of the cultural aspects of Rome were adopted by from Greece. Basically, Greece was still the cultural hub during that time period. I'm going to argue that Japan has a chance to potentially supplant American soft power, and that the twin tiger thing is China as one of the tigers that is going to take care of America militarily and economically, and China as the or as and Japan as the other tiger that is going to supplant America culturally. I don't know if that's going to be true or not, but I'm going to present my case, and you guys can let me know. So, um, why the soft. So why do I think that Japan will take over America as the soft power dominant person? So I got this idea when I was listening to Ricada Law, Nick over there, and he had somebody on. I forgot his name, but they were talking about anime and stuff like that, and I kind of realized as they were talking about it, like how much anime and a lot of Japanese culture has kind of infused into Western cultures over the past couple of decades. Uh, growing up, like I watched like Pokemon and stuff like that. A lot of my generation did. And there was Dragon Ball Z. Like there was one or two here and there that people watch, but now people, it's something that much more people consume. It's something that like it's a specific thing that people kind of go out and look for. It wasn't just like, oh well, we have this Pokemon thing. There wasn't just like the one or two that kind of came over with like some of the card games and things like that, and it's just uh and the Japanese never seem to do something halfway. That's another aspect, and that one's just kind of like, I don't know. Every single time Japanese seem to get into something, they just like end up on top somehow. It's weird. That is more conjecture than anything else, but uh it's just something I've tended to notice. Um, so one of the reasons that they're going to tell you, I think they're going to take over is because they actually tell stories. They have compelling stories. They're interesting. They're fun. Sure, not everyone is great, but there's so much to choose from that it doesn't matter if they're great, right? Like in America, yeah, there's okay indie films, but they're mainly pretentious pieces of crap. And outside of that, you have Hollywood, and Hollywood is the devil's mouth basically. The and Disney's the devil mouse, and you have garbage coming out of the West, like left, right, and center, and so like if you can't tell good stories because you can't tell the truth, your stories are going to suffer, and therefore you're going to drop off in popularity. Now, there's a couple of things that this could take in terms of how it shapes up. So you could have it either take the form of someone else takes over that role, or well, someone else will take over that role, but whether or not it's a Western or Eastern person is remains to be seen, right? So, uh, because the whole coronavirus stuff, Hollywood's kind of reeling right now. They're spending tons of money on these big budget films, but there's no way for them to recoup that money and things like that. And so it opens a gap for uh, companies that were already operating not like that had a different model that was better suited for this current environment that we're in to take over. So things that are coming up. So you might have more indie studios coming up. I know, like with Vox Day and them, they're working on Rebels Run, which I'm really excited for. So maybe studios like that, smaller studios, indie studios, kind of see a rebirth, a resurgence, and we have an explosion in the West again. And there's something else that kind of takes Hollywood's place, and they fall off a cliff. Uh, and we have something that's better and Western and is going to be our thing. And I think that's going to happen regardless, whether or not when that thing replaces Hollywood, it's going to have as far-reaching of a social impact as Hollywood has been able to establish remains to be seen. And that's where either there won't be like one predominant cultural thing, or in my opinion, I think the most likely place it's going to emanate from is Japan. Uh, you just see more and more of these little aspects of Japanese culture and Asian culture in general kind of coming over here, right? You have the animes. People love either watching the movies or the TV series. They're easy to consume. They're usually fun, lighthearted. They're refreshing for Western audiences because of as the Dark Herald laid out in a great article that he had. They're different writing styles. The style of storytelling is an Eastern style where it's more centered around the group dynamic than it is around a overarching rising action normal three part not play but 3 act story. That's not what it's centered around. It's centered around these groups and there's a gang of characters, and each of these characters fills an archetypal role. It's a different way of telling a story. That's novel to Western audiences. It's something that I think is one of the reasons that they're kind of being enjoyed and taken up. On top of that, you have other aspects of Asian culture. I'm going to say Asian to kind of cheat here, but you have kind of K-pop that's starting to creep in here and there. And yes, Korean and Japanese are very different, but it's kind of a signifier of little spots that they're breaking into the culture. So you have K-pop that's starting to get larger. You have the baby metal, the Japanese heavy metal bands that are getting more popular, and those aren't nearly as popular as like the anime and stuff like that, but they are creeping in here and there. There's like I'll find random references to them here, like, and I won't have a clue what they are, but other people will, and that starts to bleed into the overall culture and stuff like that. Another aspect is Japanese whiskey. It was like something I never knew about. All of a sudden, it's like considered one of the top whiskeys in the world. They're like seemingly out of nowhere. Now, I looked this one up, and it turns out that they've been making whiskey since like the 1870s, basically when they were opened up to trade with the West. And it's been commercially available, at least in Japan, for a while, and I think it's just finally becoming commercially available here again. But it goes to show you that kind of like Japanese thing of like when the Japanese kind of come on and there's like online, it's like, this is what we're going to do now. Like they just put their all into it kind of thing. It's like this sense of like extreme perfection. It's a little bit like Germans in that sense. Kind of interesting. They're a little less... They're different, but like the exactness, there's like a similarity there. So because of those aspects, I think there's a chance that you have like a Japanese cultural takeover of at least Western cultures, and since Western cultures are kind of the ones that are leading the charge in terms of overall culture throughout the world, that might end up those connections might then end up spreading everywhere else. And so you still might have the nexus be Western cultures, but because it's coming there, and then over time it'll shift to Japan, and then that'll be the cultural nexus. So it might first be a leapfrog where it's like it starts in Japan because it's popular in America, then it ends up going worldwide kind of thing. And eventually it'll become, once it's popular in Japan, then it just like goes worldwide eventually. Like it might get to there, or maybe it'll shift as China becomes the predominant economic and military power. It'll be, if it's popular in Japan and China, then it'll go worldwide. I'm not exactly sure if that's how it's going to play out, but something to think about. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about was a question that I came across on Social Galactic, and I thought it was a good question, so I thought I would address it. So the question was, I forgot who it was by. Oh, I did write it down. Stileco on Social Galactic. This is maybe a week or two ago. So how much of China's progress over the last 30 years is just a giant version of the New Deal aided by U.S. outsourcing? If so, what happens when the outsourcing ends? or even slows down significantly? So this is a good question because of Trump's decision to um, increase tariffs and basically make it so that China can't make their market far more valuable to international firms than than American workers. So to highlight this point, I want to show you, I believe this is the correct image. Yes, the elephant graph. So the elephant graph is basically the winners and the losers over the past uh, 20 odd years, and this is even 20. I'm pretty sure this has not changed. Um, but this is 1988 to 2008, and this has probably only gotten worse. So this is like the winners and the losers over that 20-year period, and I guess 40 years at this point. So all this area are the people that are winners, and this is percentage of income distribution. So the bottom 70% of the world gained a lot outside of the very smallest 5% of the world. They all had big gains over the 20 to 40 year period that we're talking about. And then everybody that lost out was the 70 um, to like the top 95 percentile or 99 percentile. They all lost out on a bunch of money, which, by the way, this is America and Western developed nations. And then the top 1% made a crap ton of money, right? And so this right here is all of the Japanese, or all of the outsourcing of the United States to China and India. That is primarily what this is. And also there's some to like African nations and stuff like that. So the big question is, if we cut this all off, are they going to fall back down? Is this going to shift over to here, and are they going to recover? And it's a little bit of a yes and a no. So they're kind of in this very important transition period right now, and they need to, and that's why they really didn't want Trump to come in, because if they're able to pull this off, they should be okay moving forward, and then they would, in theory, take over the United States in the coming decades, economically. Just as things started, basically they got their feet planted and things started to roll. So this big boost here that we see, this is an indication of a middle class that is formed in China, and that's really good for the Chinese. And this represents their future native market, but it hasn't fully established itself yet. Things take time to get online. You got to build up the industry. You have to create. People have to get used to having the money, and demand has to be. People have to start aggregating demand, and things like that. And then on top of that, China is also subsidizing a lot of their low-tech industries. Steel is the big one, right? They have been subsidizing steel so that they can sell it basically at a loss, or what would be a loss, but they can still make money off of it, to be able to boost up their steel industry and try to drive all the other competitors out of business so they can have an economic and military edge on steel production. But the one thing that they really, really need is they need high-tech industries, so that they can export those reliably and be able to hold on to their middle class as the low-tech goods no longer yield the profit that they can do, and make it so they no longer need to subsidize it on the global market. And basically what they want to do is they want to take all of their low-tech goods that they are having to make. Basically they make a bunch of money from low-tech goods, and they make that by exporting them. They want their local market to be grown to the point where those low-tech goods are just consumed in their domestic market, and so there's plenty of jobs for people in low-tech jobs and with the domestic market, and there's enough of middle-class people to be able to consume that stuff, and then they compete and make their money through high-tech exports of, I guess one example is their hypersonic missile system, probably a military age you're not going to want to give up, but things of that nature. So that's kind of the transition they have to make. And they're not quite there yet, but this is kind of where they're at right now. So they need to establish high-tech, highly competitive industries on the global scale. And they are working on it. As Vox had pointed out, like, I'm pretty sure DLive is Chinese, and that's what we're on right now. There's a payment processor that they're working on, and China does a good job of protecting their tech giants they're domestically protecting their tech giants until they're ready to compete on the world stage. Then they'll unleash them, and they will take down people like PayPal and Twitch. And you have Alibaba is a growing one. Um, what else is there? I know they're working on their facial recognition software. That might be a spot that I'm not a huge fan of, that coming to a bunch of places, especially Western countries. But that is something that might be a high tech thing that they could sell to other people and be a valuable industry for them. So things of that nature. So they're getting there. They're getting to the point where they have this industrial base, and there's a chance that um, as America takes back some of these lower tech industrial jobs and will no longer be substitute or will start consuming more domestically and producing more domestically, that if both America and China are able to produce different high tech niche in produce different things on different high tech niche industries and export them across the globe, that they could both you'd have like a twin economic superpower thing going on. So instead of in the Cold War having the two military superpowers, you would have two economic superpowers where both America and China produce enough economic goods domestically and have enough of a strong enough domestic home base to be able to sustain those industries while being able to export highly sophisticated, high-tech industrial commodities to the rest of the world. And then you could potentially both have them be major global superpower or economic superpower type things. That's kind of one of the conclusions that free trade doesn't work comes to, is there might be, and I don't know how many of these industries there are, but there might be enough to allow for a couple of nations to be high-end consumer producer type. There might be enough economic room for two American type economies. Not America's current one, but like more the 50s style, where we're able to export a bunch of stuff. Well, 50s probably is a bad example because half the world was destroyed. But anyway, basically, there's enough domestic production and consumption to sustain key industries at home, and you export certain high-tech industries that are niche enough that they aren't replicated in other spots, and you're entrenched enough that other countries can't beat you on them. And so they have to find a different industry to try to subvert your lead or get you to buy their stuff, and then it ends up working out in the whole trade of things. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it. So it'll be interesting to see which of these two, whether or not this kind of works out, where as we move forward, obviously Trump's trying to push back against a lot of this economic stuff, but I don't think a lot of people are looking at what might be happening culturally, where we might get subverted by, not, well, it would be subverted, but might be our soft power might be getting overtaken and not being looked at because it's something that we just kind of assume we have, and it could be that China or Japan is on the up and up with that. But only time will be able to tell. So hopefully you guys found this interesting. If you're on YouTube and listening to this, please comment anything you can think of, and subscribe. I don't have a lot of people commenting, so I will be able to read your comments. And it's fun to banter back and forth, or just discuss the various topics. So I do appreciate those. Anyway, have a wonderful day, and this has been According to Andrew and the Twin Tiger Theory.